Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The following police statement is from Angus Jeffrey Fletcher, dated the 17th of the 4th, 1996. Around 5 years ago, I met a person called Sarah Saunders. I was introduced to her by a woman who I was living with at the time. This person was called Pauline Squires and lived at Redacted, Loughton, Essex. My understanding from Pauline was that she and Sarah had been next door neighbours some years earlier. At this time I did not know where Sarah was living, but knew it was in the Basildon area. I understood that Sarah was having a relationship with a person called Patrick Tate, who at the time was serving a term of imprisonment for robbery. My relationship with Pauline lasted about a year, and during that time Sarah was a frequent visitor to the house. When my relationship finished with Pauline, she went to live in America and I remained in the house in Loughton. I continued to keep contact with Sarah, and this was mainly through telephone conversations where she would inquire if I had heard from Pauline or to tell me she was expecting a child by Patrick Tate. It was general social conversations and the relationship remained platonic. Around January 1994, I had conversations with Sarah on the telephone and met with her on a couple of occasions at my workplace. At this time I was working at the Yellow Advertiser, Acorn House, Great Oaks, Basildon. I recall that one of the topics mentioned was that Pat Tate was due for release in June 94 and he wanted to go straight. She told me that prior to going to prison, Pat had been involved in the car sales business and wanted to continue in that field. Sarah raised the point that in order to do this, he would need financial backing, and asked if I'd be prepared to consider loaning some money. This stage of asking was not done in a single conversation, but was over the course of a number of conversations. I told Sarah that I would consider helping, but would need to meet Pat and consider my options. Some date in June-July 94, after his release from prison, I met Pat Tate for the first time at the Five Bells Public House, Basildon, to discuss the loan. Our meeting lasted around an hour and we were only 2 persons present. During the meeting, Pat stated he wanted to borrow around £20,000 to purchase stock. I told him that I was prepared to loan £5,000 to start with and he could show me how he could handle that figure before considering a further loan. I only did this because Sarah had agreed to act as guarantor. This agreement was verbal. I gave a cheque made out to Sarah Saunders in the sum of £5,000 to her that same day at her parents' house in Basildon. Pat was also present when this was done. The agreement at this stage was that I would receive 25% of each car sold. Within 2 to 3 weeks I had received around £200 to £300 from Pat Tate. I believe about this time Sarah and Pat were moving into Gordon Road, Basildon. The arrangement looked stable and made me feel confident that my business dealings would be safe. At this time, Pat told me he had found a car site opposite Westcliff Police Station and wanted to develop it as a good place to sell cars from, but he would need more stock to operate it. Pat told me that his plan was to have a person on site whilst he travelled around purchasing stock. He mentioned that the person he had in mind was called Bill Baxter. Through Sarah Saunders, I injected a further £10,000 into the operation. I should mention that prior to the release of Pat Tate, I had conducted a lucrative business deal, which meant that I had a substantial amount of money in my bank account. This meant I was able to make these investments without too much concern. The arrangement for repayment changed and I told Pat that I wanted a regular payment of £300 per month. He agreed to this arrangement. I received these repayments and some weeks received more than the basic £300. I visited the site to see that it was going according to plan and met Bill Baxter. I visited the site a total of 6 times. I had telephone conversations with Sarah which reinforced my confidence that my investment was safe. Within a further month, Pat suggested to me that as everything was going well, it would be better if the quality of the stock could be improved. To this end, we agreed that a further £10,000 should be invested by me into the business. I believe I gave £10,000 in cash to Pat Tate on this occasion. All repayments from Pat to me were in cash. After this further sum was invested, the repayments were increased to £500 per month. Towards the end of 1994, I started to notice a change in Pat Tate's personality. He became moody and temperamental. I raised my concerns with Sarah, who told me that her relationship with Pat was floundering and she believed he was taking drugs. I also believe Pat had moved out of Gordon Road, Basildon, and had moved in with a friend called Nipper in Southend. I do not know this person. I was still receiving my repayments. However, Pat was the victim of a shooting incident and this resulted in him being returned to prison. I continued to receive my repayments from Bill Baxter until April 1995 when they stopped. I spoke with Bill Baxter, who told me that he was not selling the cars. I spoke with Sarah, who reassured me that Pat would be released from prison in the near future and would sort out everything. She told me that her relationship with Pat was not good and she was saying that when he was released she would not be with him. She said that Pat had no interest in his son and generally their relationship was not as it had been. She also told me that Pat had taken to injecting himself with drugs. She did not specify the type of drug. As a result of this information and the lack of payments from Bill Baxter, I made a number of telephone calls to him to push for payments. Bill Baxter informed me that the cars were not selling and he was depressed. At this point, I realised there was nothing that I could do about the situation and had to rely on Sarah's reassurance that the situation would be sorted when Pat Tate was released from prison. During conversations with Sarah, the subject of leaving Tate was raised. She spoke of the problems it would involve, and I believe she mentioned that she would have to move from the area or country if she left Pat Tate. From my conversations with her, I formed the impression that Sarah was trapped in a relationship from which it would be difficult to escape. It appeared to me that Pat Tate would not let her leave the relationship without causing difficulties. At no time did Sarah talk to me about Pat Tate in terms of wishing harm to befall him. I was aware from Sarah that Pat Tate had used physical violence against her in the past. I cannot give specific details about this aspect. After Tate was released from prison in 1995, I met him at Gordon Road, Basildon. I believe this meeting was towards the end of the 11th, 95, and was in response to him telephoning me. The meeting lasted about 10 minutes, during which time he assured me that he was going to sort the business out and get it back as a profitable concern. The car business at this time had moved from the site opposite Westcliff Police Station to one in London Road, Leigh-on-Sea. I never visited this location. Pat Tate promised to honour his debt to me, and I had no option but to accept what he said concerning this matter. By this time I had a fuller picture of him and regretted my involvement with him. I just wanted to distance myself from him and the situation. That was the last time that I saw Tate before his death. I did not receive any further money from the date of the meeting with him. On the 16th of the 4th, 96, as a result of a telephone conversation, I had a meeting with Bill Baxter at the Halfway House public house at Brentwood. There he gave me £2,000 in cash. This was the final money raised from the selling of the stock remaining at the car site. As a result of this payment, I am owed £15,000 without any interest on my loan. I would add that the car business operated as APB, which stood for Angus, Pat and Bill. These being the Christian names of myself, Tate and Baxter. I have stated the circumstances in which I met Pat for the last time, but I do recall that I spoke with him on his mobile telephone a day or two before his death. The purpose of this telephone call was to obtain a progress report on the repayment of my money. He stated that he was travelling to Southend and basically gave me promises of repayment in the near future. This was the last time I spoke with him. I did not know the persons called Craig Rolfe or Tony Tucker who were found dead with Pat Tate.